For 6 months, money kept disappearing from our savings account. Every time I asked my husband where it was going, he'd smile and say, "Trust me." After 11 years of marriage, I wanted to believe him until I found something in the trunk of his car that made me question everything. Hi, my name is Hannah. I'm 34 years old, and I live in Seattle, Washington, with my husband, Ethan. We've been married for 11 years. People often say that trust is the foundation of every strong marriage. I believed that because until this happened, Ethan had never given me a reason to doubt him. He worked as a civil engineer, and I owned a small interior design studio. We weren't rich, but we had built a comfortable life together. We planned our finances carefully, talked through every major decision, and celebrated every little milestone as a team. That's why the first missing payment didn't seem important. One Saturday morning, I was reviewing our monthly budget while drinking coffee at the kitchen table. I noticed a transfer from our savings account, $500. There wasn't a note beside it. No description. Just gone. I assumed I'd forgotten about an automatic payment. Life gets busy. Mistakes happen. A few weeks later, another transfer appeared. $700. Again, no explanation. Then another, and another. By the end of the third month, more than $3,000 had quietly disappeared from our savings. That evening, while Ethan grilled dinner in the backyard, I walked outside with 2 glasses of lemonade. "Can I ask you something?" He smiled. "Of course." I noticed a few transfers from our savings account. His smile didn't disappear, but it changed, just enough for me to notice. "Oh, I've been taking care of something." "What kind of something?" He looked down for a second before meeting my eyes again. "Nothing you need to worry about." Then he reached over, squeezed my hand, and smiled like the conversation was over. Normally, that would have been enough for me. But Ethan had always explained everything. Every purchase, every investment, every financial decision. This time, he didn't. I told myself to let it go. After all, 11 years of marriage should be stronger than one unanswered question. But over the next 3 months, the transfers kept coming. 500, 800, 600, each one disappearing without a word. Then one evening, as Ethan hurried out the door saying he had one quick stop to make, I watched him drive away. For the first time in our marriage, I wasn't just confused. I was curious. And curiosity has a dangerous way of turning into suspicion. I tried to forget about the missing money. After all, Ethan had never lied to me before. Maybe he really was handling something important. Maybe I was making a bigger deal out of it than I should. For a few days, life felt normal again. We ate dinner together, watched our favorite shows, laughed over silly jokes. If someone had looked at us from the outside, they would have seen a happy couple, but I couldn't ignore what kept happening. Every few days, another transfer appeared in our savings account. The amounts were never exactly the same. $500, 600, sometimes almost 1,000. Each one disappeared without any explanation. One evening, Ethan's phone rang while he was washing the dishes. He glanced at the screen. His smile faded for just a second. "I'll be right back," he said. He walked onto the back porch and quietly closed the sliding door behind him. I couldn't hear what he was saying, only that he was speaking softly. When he came back inside, I pretended to keep reading the magazine in front of me. "Everything okay?" I asked. He smiled. Yeah, just someone from work. I nodded, but something about his answer didn't feel right. A few days later, he came home nearly 2 hours late. I'm sorry, he said as he hung up his jacket. We had to deal with an unexpected issue at the construction site. That sounded believable, until I noticed something sitting on the back seat of his car. Several colorful gift bags. The next morning, after Ethan left for work, I walked past the driveway on my way to collect the mail. The gift bags were still there. Curiosity got the better of me. I unlocked the car using the spare key we always kept in the kitchen drawer. Inside one of the bags was a brand new teddy bear. Another held children's books. There were crayons, coloring books, puzzle games, even a small birthday card that hadn't been written in yet. I stood there staring. My heart started racing. Why would my husband be buying gifts for children? We didn't have kids. None of our nieces or nephews had birthdays coming up. I carefully placed everything back exactly as I'd found it. Then I quietly locked the car again. That afternoon, I couldn't focus on work. Questions kept running through my mind. Who were the gifts for? Why was he hiding them? And why wouldn't he tell me? That night, as Ethan slept peacefully beside me, I stared at the ceiling. For the first time in 11 years, I wondered if there was a part of my husband's life that I knew nothing about. And deep down, I realized I was no longer just curious. I was preparing myself for an answer I wasn't sure I wanted to hear. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those gift bags sitting in Ethan's car. The teddy bear, the coloring books, the children's storybooks, and that little card that simply read, "Thank you for making me smile." Who was it for? Why was he hiding it? And why wouldn't he tell me? By morning, I was exhausted. I wanted to believe there was a reasonable explanation. Maybe he was helping a coworker. Maybe it really was for some company event. But deep down, I knew Ethan well enough to recognize when he was avoiding the truth. The hardest part wasn't the missing money. It was the silence. For 11 years, we'd promised never to keep important secrets from each other. Now it felt like that promise was slowly slipping away. The entire day at work, I couldn't concentrate. I stared at the same design. Plans for almost 20 minutes without making a single change. My assistant asked if I was feeling okay. I smiled and blamed it on not getting enough sleep. The truth was, I couldn't stop thinking about Ethan. Around 4:30 that afternoon, I made a decision I never thought I'd make. I grabbed my purse, locked my office, and drove toward Ethan's workplace. As I parked across the street, my heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears. I almost turned the car around. Following my husband felt wrong. It felt like I was betraying the man I'd trusted for more than a decade. But another voice inside me kept asking the same question. If he isn't hiding anything, why won't he tell me? 20 minutes later, Ethan walked out of his office carrying his usual navy blue backpack. He looked relaxed. He even smiled at one of his coworkers before climbing into his car. Nothing about him suggested he was carrying a secret. I waited until he pulled onto the road before following from a distance. He didn't take the route home. Instead, he drove across the city, passing neighborhoods we rarely visited. After nearly half an hour, he turned onto a quiet street lined with older brick buildings. Finally, he pulled into a small parking lot. I parked farther down the street where he wouldn't notice my car. From where I sat, I could see him open his trunk. He took out two of the colorful gift bags I'd seen the day before. Then he walked toward the entrance. Before he could reach the door, it suddenly swung open. A little girl, no older than 7, ran outside with the biggest smile on her face. "Ethan!" she shouted. She wrapped both arms around his waist like she'd known him forever. I gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. My heart sank. I didn't know who she was, but in that moment, my imagination began filling in answers that terrified me. For a few seconds, I couldn't move. The little girl hugged Ethan so tightly that he almost lost his balance before laughing and hugging her back. Then he handed her one of the colorful gift bags from his trunk. She looked inside. Her eyes lit up. Without thinking, she threw her arms around him again. I felt my heart sink. For 6 months, I'd searched for answers. Now I stood only a few yards away, convinced I was about to discover the one truth I never wanted to face. I slowly stepped out of my car. Every step toward the building felt heavier than the last. Part of me wanted to turn around, to drive home, to pretend I'd never followed him. But another part of me needed to know. I quietly walked across the parking lot. The front door hadn't closed completely. I gently pushed it open. The first thing I noticed wasn't silence. It was laughter. Children's laughter. It echoed through the hallway. The walls were covered with colorful paintings, paper butterflies, and dozens of handprints made from bright paint. Somewhere nearby, someone was playing the piano. For a moment, I wondered if I'd come to the wrong place. A woman wearing a volunteer badge walked toward me with a friendly smile. "Can I help you?" I hesitated. "I'm looking for my husband." She tilted her head. "What's his name?" "Ethan." The woman's face immediately brightened. "Oh, Ethan's here." She smiled as though she'd known him for years. "You must be Hannah." My heart skipped a beat. "You know my name?" "Of course. He talks about you all the time." I stared at her, completely confused. "I'm sorry. I think you have the wrong person." She laughed softly. "No, you're exactly who I thought you were." Before I could ask another question, she gestured toward a large room at the end of the hallway. "He's with the kids." I slowly walked closer. When I reached the doorway, I stopped. There was Ethan, sitting cross-legged on the floor with nearly a dozen children gathered around him. Some were drawing pictures. Some were building puzzles. Others simply sat beside him, smiling as he read from one of the very storybooks I'd found in his car. The little girl who had hugged him earlier sat beside him, proudly holding the teddy bear he'd brought. Another little boy excitedly showed Ethan a drawing. Ethan smiled. "That's incredible, buddy." The boy beamed with pride. Then something else caught my attention. Several of the children wore hospital wristbands. A few had tiny bandages on their arms. One little boy pulled an off-hor pole beside him as he walked. That's when I finally noticed the sign hanging on the far wall. Children's Family Support Center. This wasn't another family. This wasn't another life. It wasn't an affair. It wasn't gambling. It wasn't debt. My husband had been spending his evenings bringing gifts, reading stories, and helping children whose lives had been turned upside down. The money that had disappeared from our savings had been turning into moments of joy for families who needed it most. Tears filled my eyes before I even realized I was crying. Just then, Ethan looked up from the storybook. Our eyes met across the room. The smile on his face faded. He slowly stood up. For the first time in 6 months, Neither of us knew what to say. For a few seconds, neither of us said a word. The room that had been filled with children's laughter suddenly faded into the background. Ethan looked surprised to see me standing there. "Hannah," he said quietly. I wiped away the tears that had already begun running down my face. "So," I whispered, "this is where the money's been going." He glanced around the room before looking back at me. "I was hoping you'd never find out like this." I shook my head. "For 6 months, I thought you were hiding something from me." "I was," he admitted, "but not for the reason you think." He gently asked one of the volunteers to continue reading to the children before leading me into the hallway. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Finally, I asked the question that had been living in my heart for months. "Why didn't you tell me?" Ethan leaned against the wall and let out a slow breath. "Do you remember the little boy we met 10 years ago?" I frowned. "The one at the grocery store?" He nodded. "He was collecting donations for his little sister." The memory slowly came back. His sister had been fighting cancer. Our lives had been busy afterward, and I hadn't thought about that family in years. "I found out later," Ethan continued, "that she didn't survive." His voice almost broke. I couldn't stop thinking about how helpless their parents looked. He stared down at the floor. I promised myself that if I was ever in a position to help families going through something like that, I would. I reached for his hand. "So every month," he nodded, "I buy toys, books, games. I help pay for meals. Sometimes I cover hotel rooms for parents who travel from out of town." He smiled softly. "The money isn't what they remember. It's the feeling that someone still cares." I looked through the window into the activity room. The little girl was hugging the teddy bear Ethan had brought her. Another little boy laughed as he proudly showed him a drawing. Suddenly, every late night, every missing dollar, every quiet phone call, every gift bag made perfect sense. "I thought you didn't trust me," I admitted. He squeezed my hand. "I trusted you completely. I just didn't want this to become something people praised me for. If I told you, I knew you'd tell everyone how proud you were." I couldn't help laughing through my tears. "You're probably right," he smiled. "My dad always told me, the best kindness is the kind no one expects a reward for." Those words stayed with me. On the drive home, I looked at Ethan differently than I ever had before. Not because he had kept a secret, but because I finally understood why. The following weekend, I asked if I could come with him. His face lit up. From that day on, we spent our Saturday afternoons together at the center, reading stories, playing games, celebrating birthdays, and watching children smile even during the hardest days of their lives. The money we saved was never as valuable as the memories we helped create. Sometimes, the greatest acts of love aren't the ones people see. They're the quiet sacrifices made when no one is watching. And looking back now, I'm grateful I followed my husband that day. Because I didn't discover another life. I discovered another side of the man I'd loved all along. If you were in Hannah's position, would you have followed your spouse to find the truth? Or would you have kept trusting them? Let me know your thoughts in the comments.